what's up, everyone? Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. Excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I'm really excited to have Juan on with us. Juan is one of our students that just finished going through the summer 2024 recruiting process. We've been working with him for, about 5 months, I guess. Yeah, if I'm doing the math correctly.
Yep.
Oh, almost 6 months,
Might be a little
actually.
bit, yeah.
Yeah, like probably 5.5 months. And he just finished the process, was able to get an offer, a really good offer, actually. And so wanted to get him on here to just talk to you guys about his experience and, walk you guys through kind of how he was able to do what he did. And hopefully you guys can glean some insights along the way that will help you with your own recruiting process as well. So with that said, first of all, Juan, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. And if you don't mind, maybe just starting things off by introducing yourself briefly and letting our audience know kind of like what your profile is and coming into investment banking recruiting.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Sam. It's an absolute pleasure. Pleasure's completely mine. Just to start off, I guess, my name is Juan. I was originally
Uh-oh.
made in China. Was born, played middle school, high school. Oops. Is there network issues?
Yeah, we had a little bit of lag there, but you're back now.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, I'll just start over. I'll start the intro all over again. But
No
yeah,
worries.
hi, my name is Juan. It's a pleasure to be here. Starting from the top, born in China, raised in New York City. I've been a huge basketball player my entire life. Played a little bit of semi-pro back in China. I really started my career off in venture capital, specifically investing in A, B, C, D, AI, blockchain, cloud, and data analytics. Did a lot of internships there, but eventually realized that I wanted to dive deeper into more, established companies that were leading industries and actually had, solid financial statements, which is why I decided to kind of make that transition into investment banking and kind of, not have to forego that opportunity cost of, not recruiting in college, which is kind of why I went down that path, got involved with Wall Street Mastermind, and, as Sam said, got a pretty decent offer at a solid investment bank. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Cool. So I guess the first thing that people always are curious about is like, where did you end up getting the offer? So can we
Mhm.
kind of just start there?
Yeah, 100%. So I got the New York City generalist offer at Jefferies for the summer of 2024.
Awesome. And so obviously I would say Jefferies is probably top 15, top 20 bank. I would say probably, I mean, they're called a middle market bank, but really they're probably the best middle market bank out there. And really, for all intents and purposes, they compete with all the bulge bracket and elite boutique banks for deals, right? So that's it's obviously a great offer. And we've had a lot of students go to Jefferies before and they all have great experiences there. I guess like, going back to what we said in the beginning, um, you've been with us for about 5.5 months, right? Uh, Prior to that, because I mean, coming in, you were basically like, it was like towards the end of your fall semester
Mhm.
of sophomore year,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And I think
Yep.
at that time, maybe like one or two banks had already posted applications, like RBC and Rothschild, and
Mhm.
maybe there were one or two others, but like what had you been doing up to that point on your own already? Like prior to Wall Street Mastermind, what were some of the steps that you had already taken? What were some of the resources you were using? Can you kind of just like walk people through that first?
Yeah, 100%. So, I was a transfer student, right? And, from a pretty non-target to a target. So at my non-target school, I was actually part of the investment banking club,
Mm,
almost just for fun and just was involved with that. And got pretty high up in the executive position and learned a lot about the technicals, the foundations of banking, and got really interested in that. But when I went to the, target school, and try to get into these finance clubs, I just couldn't, right? My technicals weren't there, soft skills weren't there. Just nothing was working out. And I wasn't 100% serious about banking.
mm,
So kind of, after taking a look, an all-encompassing look at kind of my entire profile, which has been pretty, non-technical so far, non-finance related and super heavy investing, in early stage companies. I wanted to, be able to, develop that skill set to carry me for a longer period of time because early stage investing, wasn't really something that could create like, a tremendous high growth potential career,
Yeah.
especially out of college, which is why I kind of made that, transition there. But again, like I never fully made, the 100% commitment in my head that, all right, I want to go full investment banking,
Mm.
until, after I joined the program. But before that program, started, I was, having a lot of trouble with, recruiting for some of these finance clubs at the target school and, doing what I can, like talking to a few people here and there for networking, but just felt very lost, honestly.
Got it. Okay. So you're saying when you joined Wall Street Mastermind, you basically joined Wall Street Mastermind right when you made the decision that, hey, I want to pursue investment bank. I want to seriously pursue investment banking. Like before that, you just kind of dabbled with it, but you didn't really do too much. And this was like, as soon as you knew this is the path you want to go
Exactly.
down, you just decided to go all in, basically.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, got it. One thing that you mentioned that was pretty interesting was so you
Mhm.
transfer from a non-target to a target, and then so a couple questions there. One, so you transferred at the beginning of your sophomore year then, as opposed to at the beginning of your junior year. Is that right? I think we might be having some Wi-Fi issues. Can
Right.
you
So I
hear me?
finished sophomore year. So sorry, I finished freshman year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I transferred, so I finished freshman year completely and started, sophomore year, as a regular sophomore student at the new target school.
Gotcha. So that's one thing that I want to call out for people too is like if you are thinking about transferring from a non-target school to a target school, which like obviously that can be helpful from a recruiting standpoint to go to a better school. But if you are going to do that, you want to make sure you do kind of what Juan did, which is make sure you transfer at the beginning of sophomore year. Because a lot of people they wait 2 years at their current school before transferring, and then you're going in as a junior, and then by then like the majority of recruiting is already done, right? And so like even though now you're at a target school, it's like a lot of these firms that you were hoping to get into are no longer recruiting, so it kind of defeats the purpose, right? So I think that's like the first important takeaway that I want people to have. But I think the question that I have for you though, which I think is probably more interesting for people, is you've actually been on both sides of being like a non-target student and a target school student, and it sounds like you because a lot of times like people are either one or the other,
Yeah.
and it's hard for them to visualize like what is the difference in terms of the
Mhm.
types of resources you have on campus, or even like the quality of the clubs, or how hard it is to get in. It sounds like when you were at the non-target school you were actually like an exec level member at the club, but then you said that at your new target school you couldn't even get into the club. So like what was like what was so different about it? I guess like how do you go from being like an exec member to like not even making the cut, I guess.
Mhm. No, that's a fantastic question. And it's like the, I guess question of did I make the right choice of transferring versus non-transferring? I think there's two things that I could say to that. I think first I'll talk about the resources standpoint, and then I'll talk about right like the person who's actually doing the transferring and how to actually take advantage of those resources. Because as a matter of fact, like even though you're at a non-target, it doesn't necessarily put you out of the running for a lot of these banks. So the non-target that I was at specifically, like in terms of recruiting stuff, just looking at like LinkedIn and all the people who are at these different firms, these top 15 firms, I think per company, like maybe they were at most, right, like 25 to 50, right? And that's like me, like kind of semi-target as well, right? And then if I go to my target school, right, there's almost, for JP Morgan, 250, 300, right, people. Goldman Sachs, almost 500 people. So the pool of people to network with is already much larger at a target school. That by default increases your chances because you have more opportunities and at-bats to, actually talk to, people who may, have a higher chance of responding to your cold
Mm-hmm.
network outreach messages.
Yep.
Um, but beyond that, right, like in terms of clubs, there's only like two investment clubs at the non-target school, and they weren't like feeders into these banks, right? They were just a name that you can put on your resume. They didn't have any connections to the banks themselves. Whereas at the school that I'm currently at Target, all the alumni at these banks went to these clubs and know exactly how important each of those clubs are, right? So there's an inflated value and selectivity to get into these clubs, which is why it's so hard to get in. And you're absolutely right. Like I think second point that I was trying to make is that like it's all about the person as well. If I continue down the path, like because I'm by nature, I guess you could say like a freaking hardo. And I go like really intense into things and go all in or nothing.
Yeah.
And I went into my non-target school like wanting to do as much as possible, take advantage of every single resource, which is why I kind of was able to move up that ladder in those investment clubs. And I was
Mm,
pretty much like VP almost like of the entire investment banking club, like as a freshman, right? And leading the entire entrepreneurship accelerator, like the entire consulting club as well. It was almost like it was like easier than high school almost.
mm,
But I went to my target school, like there were like maybe I applied to like 30 clubs. It was almost like applying to schools all over again for college. And zero, I think, accepted me except for one, and it wasn't even for finance. It was like a tech slash finance like mix that kind of just started.
mm,
So you can definitely stand out a lot easier in a non-target than a target. But if you really leverage your resources right at a non-target and stand out and own that leadership component, I'm sure you can still freaking kill. But it
yeah.
depends a lot on your personality and your willingness to actually go and get it.
Mm,
So I'd never say that if you're a non-target, you're out running. You just have to go and get it. And you
yeah.
have to want it really, really freaking bad.
That's
But
that's really interesting. It's kind of like it's the classic like you want to be a big fish in a small pond or you want to be
yeah,
like the small fish in a big pond
right,
dilemma, right?
exactly,
Or like even applying for college, like if you go to like a really, really good high school, there's like more quota for like how many students they'll take from your school, like the Ivy
yeah,
League schools and whatever. But also like everyone there is that they're much better students, and
exactly,
so it's
yeah,
hard for you to be like valedictorian of the class. Versus
yeah,
if you went to a crappy school, then like it's maybe easier to stand out, but also like your environment's different. Nobody
right,
around you cares about like
right,
homework or studying, and so
exactly.
are you the type of person that has like the proactiveness, and are you the self-starter, and you like have the discipline to like go against the grain and do
Exactly.
the things you should be doing even though no one else is doing it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
um
And as a matter of fact, if I were to interject a little bit, like, the top three, four people at that non-target got into like any company that they ever wanted to get into. And I've
yeah.
seen that first, as because they were my mentors, right?
Mm,
At the target, right? Like, some of my mentors were like extremely high achieving, perhaps even more high achieving than some of these like, non-target people, but still succeeded, right? Or, but, still didn't get maybe the type or high level of offer because it was just so competitive.
mm,
And the firms could only take X amount of people from my school, right? They can't take
mm,
more than five, but they can't take more than six. But that being said, right, like my target school right now, still like, for Jefferies, it's a direct recruiting pipeline. And that just simply does not exist at us.
yeah.
Not target school. But
Yeah.
you could say that like, it's just something that, you have to see, right? From being on both sides of the table.
Yeah. um I guess the other that's really insightful. The other thing coming back to is like, okay, so you applied to like 30 clubs and you said you
Mhm.
only got into one. Like,
Yeah.
what was it that was so hard about this club recruiting
Yeah.
process? Or like in hindsight, I bet you like knowing what you know now, like now that you've gone
Yeah.
through banking recruiting, which is I would say even harder, knowing what you know now, probably like if you think back on what you had to do back then, you could probably do those things now. But maybe at the time you weren't equipped to do what was asked of you. But like what was the struggle there, I guess?
Yeah, for club recruiting, it's interesting because it's very cultural fit focused, and it's also like there's a heavier emphasis on networking, right? Because at the end of the day, these are not like recruiters that are recruiting you; these are freaking students, right? And students want to recruit their friends. And as a sophomore that's just going in as a transfer, you have zero friends, you have no network there, you don't know
Mm,
any, and especially as a non-finance major, you're not in those classes with these finance people, right? That are
mm,
actually running clubs because I'm learning like freaking law and what is it like data science, right? And international relations. It has nothing to do with finance.
mm,
So that's kind of why it was hard. There's also the element of me being an arrogant prick. I was really cocky at that time, and I think I just didn't come off the right way. Um,
mm,
like, oh, I'm a founder. I'm semi, like, all these different things come up, and I'm
mm,
definitely a lot more humble now. I think banking definitely the entire recruiting process helped me with that. But um, yeah, I think those two things combined, and of course the technicals are given. That's just something you just gotta learn. But beyond that, I think most important is the cultural fit, the friendships, that are the most important.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I always think of like these, because we have a lot of students at these target schools too, and then a lot of them are in these clubs, and sometimes we help them get into these clubs because, really the way I think about it is like the club recruiting processes they just kind of mirror the IB recruiting process. It's almost like, but instead of going for the pro league, you're going for like the minor league or something, right? It's
Yeah,
like it's not going to be as hard as getting into like a top 20 investment bank, but they're
exactly.
looking for all the same things. You got to network with the members. It was
Mhm.
just kind of like you got to network with the bankers. You got to pass the
Yeah,
interviews. There's behavioral interviews. There's
yeah,
technical interviews. They look at your resume. They want the best. They want the people with the best resume. So like it's actually you're looking for a lot of the same qualities, which is why I said like I bet if you were to go back through that process again now, knowing what you know
yeah.
now, you probably do a
Exactly.
lot better, right?
Yeah.
So I guess moving on to the kind of next question, like what
Mhm.
you mentioned earlier, like it's like, hey, like you joined Wall Street Mastermind, like as soon as you decided that banking is like what you want to pursue, right? I want to kind of like ask you about your mindset and mentality there. And maybe it's
Mhm.
just your personality because you say you always go all in. But like, I feel like there are two types of students who join Wall Street Mastermind. There's like people like you who, as soon as they know that they want to do banking, there's like, okay, I'm going
Yeah,
to like maximize, like I'm gonna optimize for the best outcome possible and just like do it like the best way I could possibly find
yeah,
from the get go. And then there's some people that are like, I have to like try on my own first, struggle through it, maybe fail a bunch of times, really make sure that hey, this isn't something that that I can do without help before
yeah.
I go out and get help, right? And so like talk about kind of like your mentality, like what made you want to join Wall Street Mastermind right then and there, as opposed to like maybe going the other route.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different factors, but I'm just thinking about the cost, right? And there's two things. There's just the cost of time, and there's just the cost of money, right? And for me, I think I had an abundance of both, time and money, and I knew that I wanted to create the best possible outcome for myself. And that
Mm-hmm.
was, high finance, right? Investment banking, PE, and I kind of ruled out VC because that's just not like, a very straightforward way of getting into that really upper high level, right? It wasn't very clear cut.
Yeah.
So it was those two options, and I just knew I wanted to get it right, no matter what. Because again, I wanted to be the best. It's like the Kobe mindset, right? The Mamba mentality.
Yeah.
And it's just the deal I made with myself at that point in time. Like I made money right throughout the summer that I'm completely on my own. Stock market was down. I liquidated everything and just went all in on the program because again, this was an investment that I made in myself, that I knew that would put me closer and get me a ticket into a seat where I would able to invest further into myself and get me into higher and higher places of
Mm.
more growth, more you can say status, more power, whatever it is. Just be a better person. Be a person I can be more proud of. And at the end of the day, like it's all I was. I just, especially, it's in the whole thesis of banking, right? Like, especially as a student who's this young and this energetic. My biggest regret is, when I'm 30, when I don't have that energy, like why I didn't use this energy sooner.
Mm.
So I fear that, yeah, which is why I kind of went down the path of highest resistance, but also greatest outcome.
Yeah. You said something really interesting there. So one, obviously, what I gleaned from that is you pay for this entire program on your own, right? Like you're
Yeah.
like fully financially independent, which
Mhm.
not all students do that. Not all of them are capable of doing that, but obviously you've been running your own like companies and doing like VC stuff in the blockchain
Yeah.
space, like you said on the side. And so you probably made, decent money from there. And then obviously you're also investing on your own in the stock market and things like that. So like you've been doing a lot of investing, right?
Mhm.
But I think one thing that stood out to me about what you just said is like there have been multiple instances where we talked to a student who really wants to work with us because they know that we can help them with recruiting, and then they're like, oh, but I don't have money, I can't afford this, but they have this like portfolio, they have this stock portfolio sitting there, which would be enough to pay for the
Right.
program. But then when we talk about, well, why don't you just liquidate your stocks and invest in this program instead? A lot of people are not willing to do that because I think people get kind of like emotionally attached to their
Mhm.
positions, right? Like
Yeah.
if you have like, and it works both ways. Like if you have
Yeah.
stocks in your portfolio that are up a lot, what do people tend to think? They're like, oh, this is gonna keep going up forever, and I'm making so much money on this, like I can't let it go. And if you have money that's like in the red, like positions where you're down on, you're like, oh, but
Mhm.
I'm down on this position, so I can't sell right now. I gotta wait for it to come back up. And then so like
Yeah.
no matter what, it's just like I don't want to touch my stocks, right?
Yeah.
Talk about your mindset, your mentality. Like it seemed like you were very detached to your positions, or maybe you weren't. I don't know. Maybe it was a tough decision, but like, what was the logic or rationale behind like, oh, I'm just gonna liquidate all my stocks and put that into this program instead? Like, how did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, uh, my thesis is always like, there's no better investment than yourself, right? At the end of the day, like number one, the biggest thing you should invest in is yourself, right? Your health, your knowledge, and that's it, and your family, I guess. And in order to take care of your family, you got to invest in yourself, right? Your stocks aren't going to do that for you. It's going to gain you like maybe marginal improvements, but especially at this young of an age, right? Like, the opportunity cost is too high, I guess is the way to put it. The opportunity cost is too high, right? Like, sure, you can have your stocks for the next year, right? Throughout the next 2 cycles of recruiting, right? Let me put it this way, like there's only one chance to recruit, right, as a sophomore.
Mm,
And from that opportunity, you have the opportunity to gain, a high six-figure salary for that, right? And after that, it gets incrementally harder to be at a position to get that high six figures, especially if
mm,
you're, not in finance. Um, but for stocks, right? Like you can have that whatever amount of positions you have, you can gain X amount of money, for this certain year. And then that's it. Like sure, that you'll carry on a little bit over time, compound, but um, in terms of the future, the present cost, of the time and the money that you have sitting in your bank account, it'll go farther, right? Investing in yourself because that is what you can carry with you forever, right? And
mm.
you to a better launch pad. Same exact reason why we spend money for college. Same exact reason why we get braces, right? It's because
Yeah.
that'll bring more enjoyment and more like a higher trajectory of growth over time. So um, it's much better than just having that money sit in the account and slowly compound over time. But
Yeah, and
both.
I think this is really, really, I think the way you thought about it is very logical and very mature, right? I think like what I'll add to that is like one, you're right in terms of opportunity cost. The two things are different because one of these investments you can only make it one time, and there's a time for it, which is like right now. Like you
Exactly.
want to get in banking, like IB recruiting happens sophomore year, and if you don't get in, like you don't get a junior summer internship, it becomes exponentially harder, right? Whereas like
Yeah.
stocks, like you will always be able to invest in stocks, trade in and out of positions, like for the rest of your life, pretty much, right? So that's not something that you have to do right now, right? That's point one. But I think point two also is just like I always laugh when people are like, oh well, like I'm gonna keep it in my stock portfolio or in my retirement account because like the law of compounding or whatever. I'm like, okay, sure. Like, what do you think the S&P 500 is returning right now? Like long-term historical average. Oh, 10% a year. Okay, great. So like, how big is your portfolio? Let's just like use rounded numbers. Like, let's say your portfolio is $10,000. Okay. Um, so you keep your money in there. It's going to earn you $1,000 next year, and it's going to earn you $1,100 the year after that, and it just keeps compounding, right? 10% a year every year. Okay, that's nice, but like you going from $10,000 to $11,000 and going from $11,000 to 12.1 the next year, like, is that going to change your life at all whatsoever? Like, no, not really, right? Would it change your life though if you are able to graduate with a job that pays 150 to $200,000 a year, and then that's like the lowest amount that you'll ever make on an annual basis for the rest of your career for the next 20, 30,
Exactly.
40 years. Like, which
Yeah.
one do you think has a bigger impact on your life? Because the average college grad, makes $55,000 a year when they graduate. Even if you go to a great school, let's say you're above average, you make 75, 80. Okay. I'll give you like a 50% bump over your peers. Like, versus making double or triple that. Like, that
Yeah.
actually does change your life. Right. And so, like, I think like the people that start thinking about like making money off of investments too early, it's like you're optimizing for the wrong thing. Early on, you need to optimize for your earning power. You need to optimize for like how much money you can make through like your job, through
Exactly.
your income. And like the only people that have ever gotten wealthy off of investments are the people that were already wealthy in the first place. And they have so much capital to play with that earning 10% a
Exactly.
year off of $1 million is $100,000. Like, okay, that actually is meaningful, right? But you have to have like, significant amount of capital first before you like, so it's the wrong order of operations basically, right? It's like, if a homeless person has no money, like, are you going to tell them to get a job or are you going to tell them to go think about investing? I mean, that's like an extreme case, but like it proves the same point, right? So anyway, I think like that was really, really interesting to hear that, how you thought about it, because that's not how everyone thinks about it, believe it or not. Um, so, okay. So then you come into Wall Street Mastermind, right? What did you do after coming into Wall Street Mastermind? Like if I asked you like, hey, what were like the top three like biggest wins or magical moments or like things that really made a big difference for you, or were game changers throughout this recruiting process? Like what would you say those things were?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. But I think there's just so many.
Or you don't
Especially
have to
for
limit it to three, but like yeah, just I think the key is just like talk to us about what were like the what were the most helpful things to you, I guess, because I think
okay.
like the question that a lot of people have in their head,
Hmm.
having not gone through Wall Street Mastermind yet, is like they're like, oh well, like what's the difference between if I try to figure everything out on my own versus if I have Wall Street Mastermind? Like, isn't all information out there? Isn't all the same? So like, what were some things that happened in Wall Street Mastermind where you could look at it and definitively say like, yeah, if I try to do this on my own, like I would not have gotten the same results. Right? That's another way to.
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest thing is perhaps just I think a lot of people talk about it, but it's just the structure, honestly. At the end of the day, we're all students. We all have our own things to do, side projects, school here and there, like all these different obligations that we got to attend to, right? And
Mm,
oftentimes we forget about what's most important, right? And that's what college is for ultimately, right? Is helping you get that first job out of college and set you up for the best career possible.
mm,
So that, as a matter of fact, is recruiting. That, as a matter of fact, is what all Wall Street Mastermind is for. It is kind of creating that accountability at the end of the day, so that you finish, right, what you need to finish to complete your goal of what college is as a whole is to get the best
mm,
job possible, right? And I think most importantly, Wall Street, Mastermind has a lot of different modules, a lot of different chapters that kind of guide you through everything from networking, technicals, application, resume, like everything from A to Z, right? So there's nothing that's missing. And if there is something that's missing, you can just talk to the coaches directly. But
mm,
I think the thing that was, there's so many things that were, very helpful. Um, but like if I were to just kind of think about the things that were like most game changing to me, um, it's hard to say, honestly. But I think perhaps the most important was probably like the direct access to these coaches.
mm,
It's literally personalized attention. Um, who they know who you are, right? They understand your background, where you're coming from,
mm,
and they're actual people, right? They're not just robots, AIs. Maybe they'll be AIs one day, but for now they're actual people,
mm.
right? And they will respond to your questions genuinely, right, with care, and will try to do their best to um, kind of solve whatever issue they have, regardless of how small or big it is. So it's just an outlet for you to kind of confide if you have, troubles, but also, to share wins with. There's that. And I think, for me specifically, right, you know, one of the coaches was actually, a former alumni at one of the banks I was recruiting for and gave me a full answer to like why this bank. That was extremely unique. He utilized some of his own anecdotes
Mm,
and kind of gave me that extra ammunition, right, to go into the interview with, to kind of nail the why this bank answer, because that's probably the second most important question that they ask you, right, on the interview. So if I had to cite one example of that, being tremendously helpful, I think it was probably that helped me really land that offer, because that time between I got that interview between that when that interview actually starts was too short to actually network with someone who actually went to that firm, and
mm.
my coach to be an alumni there and give me that insight was more than invaluable. So um yeah.
Got it. Okay. So basically, sounds like it's really the personalized. I mean, two things. One, the structure obviously is really important. And I think a lot of people, when it comes to recruiting, they lack that structure and they're kind of like running around like a chicken with their head cut off. It's like, oh my God, I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to network. I got to prep for interviews. I got to do internships. I got to like keep my grades up. And it's just like, what do I do? Right. And that obviously is like a recipe for failure because there's so much you have to do and so little time. And you really have to be organized and structured about how you approach everything. And also like there is actually like an order of operations in terms of like what order you do things in to achieve the best results, because a lot of these things you have to do, they have dependencies on each other, right? And what I see a lot of students do all the time is they kind of like do things out of order and then like it doesn't work and they're not sure why it's not working because they're like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. It's like, yeah, you are, but you're not doing it in the right order, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's often overlooked. But then I think like the second thing, and perhaps more importantly, something that is just like the personalized nature of the program, which is like you're not just coming in and getting a bunch of modules. You're just coming in and getting like a PDF file and say, here you go, Juan, like read
Right.
this, figure it out. And then like everyone's reading the same thing. In reality, like every student's different, right? Like some go to target schools, some go to non-target schools. Everyone's got different GPAs, different resumes. Some people are transfer students like you. There's a lot of different variables that have to be taken into account when it comes to like crafting the best game plan. And then like you just can't do that unless you apply the human touch to it, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I think like from my perspective, I don't know, right? Like the biggest difference between doing it, someone doing it on their own versus someone doing it with us is just like, it's not like we're smarter or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
that usually for most students, like you're going through recruiting for the first time ever. And so think back to like anything that you try to do for the first time. The first time you trying something, usually you're not very good at that thing because you have no experience and you've never done it before. And then on the other side, you have like our team where we've at this point done this, we've helped over 900 students to date, and that number continues to grow. Um, like it's the sheer amount of experience from going through something 900 times. Like the reps is just different. The scenarios that we've seen is just different. Like the like knowing what to do in all kinds of different situations, and more importantly, knowing what not to do because we have data on someone else before you that has already done the thing that you're thinking about doing. Like, oh, you
Yeah.
are about to do this, and that's not going to work.
Mhm.
Having that and having someone be able to tell you that so that you can avoid that mistake and save yourself from experiencing that pain, um, that can be huge because when it comes to recruiting, like a lot of times with each firm, you might get one shot, right? You get one chance. And if you botch that opportunity, like you don't get a do-over. Right. So it's like this whole idea of like, well, I can figure it out on my own. Like, yeah, you might be able to. It'll just take a lot more trial and error. And sometimes you don't have the luxury of trial and error because do you really want to be doing trial and error with your interview opportunities, for example, or with your networking opportunities? Like there's a difference between like say you have you're lucky enough to get on a phone with a managing director. That person could have single-handedly gotten you an interview, but you botched that conversation. Like, is that really worth it? Right. So I think like experience is always the best teacher, right? And I always tell people like, look, um, if you took our experience and you downloaded that into your brain, and then you applied the same level of work ethic that you would have applied regardless, like if you did this on your own, you would have tried your best, right? Now take that same amount of effort, but combine that with the experience that we now have. Like, is there any possibility that you would not get an even better offer than you would have gotten on your own? Or maybe it's the difference between you not getting an offer at all on your own to getting an offer, and that's obviously a huge difference. But even if you're relatively confident that you probably could get some sort of offer, would you not get a better offer? Right. And if you got a better offer, like what would that do for your career? What would that be worth if you got into a top 20 bank instead of a top 50 bank, top 10 bank instead of a top 20 bank, top 5 bank instead of a top 10 bank? Like, does that matter? Does having better exit opportunities matter in the long run? Yeah. Higher compensation does it matter in the long run? Yeah. Like all these things matter, right? So I think like you can, I don't know, with something, at least for me, with something like as competitive as investment banking recruiting, like there is no such thing as having too much help, right? There is no such thing as like, oh, I'm too confident. like like you just to your point, like there's so many people at your school, at your top target school, who are very, very qualified and very high achieving, and they're still not getting these jobs sometimes. And so it's just like, how can you be so sure? Right. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think there's another point, right? Like, I think, a lot of banks, one of my favorite questions that I get asked is always like, why should we hire you? It's the
Mm,
most straightforward, most direct thing in the world. And it's like the most real question that anyone could possibly ask themselves. It's like, why should I deserve to even be there? And oftentimes people are like, oh, my GPA is good. Like, it's better than everyone else. I go to a good school. Like, I got some good internships. I start my own business. Like, it's all BS. Like, dude, there's a million, people that it's like looking in a mirror and done the exact same thing.
yeah.
That's like had every single experience that's similar to mine, but probably even better, right? Probably smarter, like better resume to everything. Um, but it's I think what it all boils down to is just, how bad you really, really, really want it. And that translates into everything you do in terms of how many networking calls you get on, right? How hard you prep for interviews, right? How tailored your answers become, how much you leverage your resources, right? If you do decide to use the Wall Street Mastermind program, and everything, that's, within your area. So how resourceful can you truly be? Is completely dependent on how bad do you want it, how bad do you want to win? And, I guess it's definitely not for the lighthearted, but especially, I think even as an, if you're from like non-white, right, as an Asian, it's even harder because there's less connection points, right, to people that
Mm,
want to network with.
yeah.
And especially, with my current firm, I think I might literally be like the only Asian in my summer analyst class, which is
Really?
which is insane. So because I've looked at all the other classes before me and haven't seen a single one. So I might be literally first. And I think I might be the only one actually in my school to actually get this offer. So it's I think I definitely also beaten the odds, but it was because of I think being resourceful and being really smart and wanting it more than everyone else. I think that's
Yeah.
how you truly differentiate yourself. It's not background, resume, GPA. It's I want this more than everyone else. That's
Yeah.
why I deserve this.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're a big basketball player, and obviously, I've been watching the NBA playoffs. And to your point, like sometimes it just comes down to desire. It's just like
Yeah.
who wants it more? Who's gonna like
Right.
play defense harder? Who's gonna get the 50-50 balls? Who's getting the offensive rebounds? Like,
Yeah.
I'm a Warrior fan, and it's just like we lost the first two games against the Kings, and then
Right.
we come out in game three and we blow them out. And like when I was
Right.
watching the team play, I was like, this is the same team, but it's like the energy level is it's like completely different because they were back against the wall. They were so desperate and they just wanted that game more. Right. And
Mhm.
recruiting is kind of the same. It's like there's so many students out there who just really, really want this and they're willing to like do whatever it takes to get this. And this is like their number one priority. And that's
Mhm.
what I always tell some students, like we ask them, like, hey, scale 1 to 10, like how important is it you break an investment banking? They're like, oh, it's a 7.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, it's a 7. Okay. Well, like, why is it a 7? And they give me the reason. I'm like, all right, like, honestly, like, my honest piece of advice for you is not like, hey, come work with us. My honest piece of advice to you is like, probably just like, you should just go find something else that's going to be a 10 for you because I know way too many students that are a 10 out of 10 on investment banking and they're going to be hungrier than you.
Yeah.
They're going to be scrappier than you. They're going to be willing to do things that you're not willing to do. They're going to be willing to get on more networking calls. They're going to study for their interviews harder. They're going to do more internships and like, you're just not going to be able to compete. There's not enough jobs out there. And so just like
Right.
don't waste your time and energy. Like go find something else that you are like that you can feel that way about, right? And
Mhm.
so I think that's a really, really great point. And I think that's a good segue into kind of like my last question, which is like I feel like you've kind of already been doing this, but if I ask you for like one final piece of advice, maybe your best piece of advice that you have that you want to pass down to other people that are either still going through recruiting right now or they're about to go through recruiting in the near future. This could be something that maybe someone else told you along the way that really made a big difference for you, or maybe it's just something that you figured out on your own as you were going through the process. Like, what would you want to kind of share with people?
Yeah. This is number one, and honestly, it's probably something that I'll carry on for the rest of my life, and how I operate and how I sell myself, right? Because ultimately, you yourself as a product, and you're selling it. It's how do you showcase why your differences are important, right? Um, Go all in on your differences. It's the best way to put it, right? It's going back to my original point, right? Like all your competitors is basically like looking at yourself in the mirror. They also have great resumes, great GPAs, great SATs, great schools. But what are you different about them that makes you unique, makes you stand out? For me, it was a number of different things, right? Like a semi-professional like basketball career, plus non-traditional finance, learning law and like data science and like international relations, and the fact that I guess I was also Asian and kind of semi-international, right? Not born in the United States. And I really harped in on, my competitive spirit, right? Going deep within, just that interdisciplinary skill set, right? Of non just pure finance and, also just the discipline to learn all the technicals when I didn't have that background.
Mm.
And I think all those different things kind of made me a little bit different than, someone who was like a finance major or a business major, or someone who's just, just had pure finance internships, whereas I had like deep tech VC internships, right? Um, and I think that kind of was the tipping point between me and someone who was just, a pure finance major, business major, who had like the traditional background of, hedge fund internships, private equity internships, and, also played a sport maybe, and like also did this and that. Like have make sure the interviewer like reminds you, like, or sorry, make sure the interviewer remember something about you that's not it's not finance related. And I think that'll really push you above past the edge for really standing out.
Mm. Yeah, that's really, really good advice. Um, I'll tell you guys something like, we used to do super days for candidates, and the way super days work, like we get like whoever the interviewer is going to be, like a handful of bank, or not more than a handful, but like whoever the group of bankers that got selected to do super days, like we block off our entire day, and then we just do like 30-minute back to back to back to back to back interviews with like all these different candidates that just cycle through, right? Especially like if you're at a target school, like we might do it back then on campus. Nowadays sometimes it's remote, but like
Yep.
we just have like interview rooms in the career center, and then like we stay in the same room, and then different students keep cycling in and out every 30 minutes. And so like over like a 10-hour day, we might interview like 18 to 20 people, right? And like at the end of the day, we all get in a room and we talk about like who we like the most, who do we want to hire. And I kid you not, like there are honestly like a lot of students that we meet, and then we just like don't remember anything about them. I mean, we have our notes, but it's just like, well, who is this guy again? Like, because we talked to so many people back to back to back that day, and they all kind of blurred together. And like, what makes it worse is when everybody's reading the same interview guides. Everybody's like read from XYZ guide that says, for this answer, like this is what you got to say, right? And like, so if that's really all you're doing, that's like the opposite of what Juan just said, which is like, instead of really differentiating yourself, you're actually just like blending in with everyone else. And I can tell you right now, like, if as the interviewer, I barely can remember who you are, like, do you really think you're the person that I'm going to be pounding the table for when I'm in that discussion room at the end of the day? Like, of course not, right? I'm I'm more likely to vouch for the people that I really remember that they stood out to me in some way. And so that's like a huge part of what the game is like when it comes to like passing interviews, especially in like a super day setting where they're not just like they didn't just talk to one person, right? And so I think it's really, really good advice. Like, easier said than done. Like, to really, really differentiate yourself, you have to like do a lot of introspection, and you have to like really be genuine, but also like sometimes you need feedback from someone who has actually interviewed a lot of people to tell you like, hey, is this actually unique? Does this actually differentiate me? Or does this just sound like a dime a dozen and just like what everyone else is saying? Because a lot of times, like if you're going through the interview for the first time, like you don't know what everyone else is saying. That's another big challenge too, right? So if you know what other people are saying, like how do you know if your answer actually stands out? Right. That's where like having that coach, having that feedback from someone who's done this hundreds of times can be really, really valuable. Right.
Yeah. And I'd actually add another point as well on top of, the finding your differences. And that's like the one skill that schools don't teach, right? Soft skills,
Mm,
communication, right? Delivery. All those things are things that, it's so soft that people often overlook, but is ever more important in this day and age. Like just think about how many international students, right, with like perfect intelligence, like they made their way all the way to this country through their intelligence, right? And somehow
mm,
got into these schools, but somehow they can't pass a single first round ever. Why?
mm,
It's because they can't connect with the interviewer. They have, a pretty thick accent. They don't know how to talk about bars, memes, football, like things that can, truly connect with, I guess you could say, these Americans, right? And not be passionate about in their speech because it's just such a lack of confidence. But right, if you can, right, be very self-aware, right? Have self-respect, have that confidence, and know that you are the best candidate, or you are someone that can make it, right? Because you have put in the work and you have the credentials, you have like done your research, then there should be no reason why you shouldn't speak with as much confidence as you can possibly muster and showcase that you are more than qualified for what this is. Because as a matter of fact, like everyone is more than qualified. It's not a hard job. It's not honestly a hard job to do. You just really want it. It's really not, right? So like if you can master those soft skills, right? If there was a way to master those soft skills and gain that confidence when you are going into those interviews, so you can deliver your answers in a way that's just rock solid and memorable, and
yeah.
not shy, like saying a lot of ums and ahs, then you'll definitely stand out, and people will definitely remember you.
Yeah. I mean, communication skills is huge, is very important. Um, that's like the first impression that people have of you, right? Like two different people saying the exact same things, but one's a good communicator and the other one's not. Like it makes people feel differently, right? And ultimately, that's what an interview comes down to: is like how are you making your interviewer feel about you, right? So I think that's really really good advice. But look, guys, we're running up on time here, but I think hopefully this has been a really really insightful interview for you guys. I think Juan shared a lot of just really helpful tips and just things that made him successful. So hopefully you guys can take that and incorporate it into your own processes as well and help you be more successful. But if you're going through the process currently and you have a similar mindset where you're the type of person who understands the importance of investing in yourself, you're the type of person who wants to go all in when once you decided that you want to do something, right? And you're the type of person who's taking like investment making recruiting very seriously, and you understand that, hey, like in terms of opportunity cost, like you really only get like one chance to do this and do it the best way possible. And like if that's you and you want to like put your best foot forward from the get-go and not like have to go through a lot of trial and error and make a bunch of mistakes along the way and just incur like unnecessary pain, is probably the easiest to put it. Then I want you to reach out to us, speak with our team, see like if we can help. I mean, I can't promise anything up front, but the way we do it is we're going to ask you some questions, learn more about your specific profile and your specific situation. What kind of banks are you trying to get into? What do you feel like you need help with in order to get there? And then, like, based on what you tell us, um, we will either one map out like a customized game plan for you that based on all the experience that we have helping over 900 students, here's what we think you need to do, and here's the order that you need to do it in, and here's how we can help you with it. We'll either do that um, and move forward together, or like at a minimum, even if you don't think it's a good fit for us to work together, or maybe we don't think it's the best fit, we'll at a minimum still just do our best to give you some advice on what we think you should do, even if you were to attempt this on your own. So either way, like our goal is just for you to walk away from this call with as much value as possible, regardless of whether you end up working with us or not. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, you can go apply for this call or book this call with us at www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street is abbreviated to ST. So it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And, we look forward to talking to you. All right. So with that said, Juan, I want to thank you so much again for taking the time to be on here with us today. This is, again, super insightful for our audience, I'm sure. And I want to just congratulate you again on an amazing offer at Jefferies. It's a great firm. I think you have a great experience there. The CEO is, I think, one of the most interesting guys, one of the most interesting CEOs on Wall Street. And so I think you're gonna have a great time there. And I look forward to just seeing all the success that you have ahead of you and what you continue to accomplish. Like, knowing what we know about you and everything you've done up to this point, we have no doubt that you're going to continue to just be a very successful person going forward. And so thank you for letting us play a small part in this process on your journey. And yeah, like, just don't be a stranger if there's anything else that we can ever help you with.
100%. I'm really humbled to hear that, Sam. And again, like, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and helping out so many people along the way. I know this is something, right, that's not just for wealth, but also spiritual wealth, like within your own soul. And I see that as something that I hope to aspire to someday down in the future as well. So I'll be keeping in touch, and I'll be trying to glean as much lessons as I can, even after this recruiting process from you. So thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I appreciate that. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap it up here. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. And until next time. All right.